Hello and welcome to Africa This Week with me, Ayo Johnson. This show looks at the affairs of the sub-Saharan Africa from news to politics to culture and community initiatives. This afternoon we'll be starting off with the week's headlines with a discussion on the new case of Ebola in Liberia. We're also reviewing articles and news stories in the media relating to Africa. Lastly, we'll be looking at Uganda, where the 12th Muslim imam has been killed in the last 2 years. Our reporter Adma Munu has more on this story and the rest of the week's headline news.
UN observers declared on Thursday the Burundi elections were not free or credible due to violence and boycotting of the elections. Polling stations opened early on Monday, but turnout was low in and around the capital city of Bujumbura, partly because the election was boycotted by the opposition and many civic groups. The United Nations has released a damning report accusing South Sudan's army of raping and burning girls alive, along with other human rights abuses. The UN mission in South Sudan says it has evidence that governmental troops, also known as SPLA, have perpetrated what it calls widespread human rights abuses, including killing, abduction and looting. Some of the most disturbing allegations focuses on the abduction and sexual abuse of women and girls, some of whom were reportedly burnt alive in their dwellings. The UN said it had sought access to the sites of alleged atrocities, but had been routinely denied access by the SPLA, though further interviews with eyewitnesses and victims provided further corroboration of the allegations. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council has imposed sanctions on 6 South Sudanese generals, 3 from each side of the conflict. They face global travel bans and asset freezes. An Italian Coast Guard vessel on Thursday morning brought some 900 migrants rescued in the Mediterranean Sea to a port in the southern Calabria region. The migrants come from countries such as Morocco, Libya, Nigeria, Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia and Ivory Coast, and other countries in Central Africa. Almost 150 people are reported to have been killed by suspected Boko Haram militia in Nigeria's northeastern Borno state. Eyewitnesses say the gunmen stormed the village of Kukawa near Lake Chad on Wednesday evening and killed 97 people, including women and children. Gunmen shot dead 48 men after they had finished prayers in 2 villages near the town of Monguno. French President François Hollande addressed members of Benin's government at the presidential palace in Cotonou on Thursday. Hollande called Benin a model of democracy for the continent. Hollande said Africa can count on French support against Boko Haram. Liberia confirmed a 3rd Ebola case on Thursday, nearly 2 months after it was declared Ebola-free. The outbreak was declared over in Liberia on May the 9th, even as cases have continued to emerge in neighbouring Sierra Leone and Guinea. Liberia accounts for more than 4,800 of the 11,220 deaths in the West African outbreak. The first new Liberian case, 17-year-old Abraham Mamega, died on Sunday in the village of Nedoane in Margibi County, about 50 kilometres from the capital Monrovia.
We did invite a representative from the Minister of Health in Liberia to contribute to the story, but we didn't receive a response. However, joining me from Liberia is Kate Thompson, who's the managing editor of Ebola Deeply. And on the line we have Ibrahima Silla, who's the commentator on African affairs and is calling from Ghana. Welcome to the both of you. Kate, do you have my voice?
I do.
Kate Thomas, yes, thank you so much for joining us. Kate, you on the ground in Liberia, how disappointed were they to have been Ebola-free to have a case right now?
I think people are quite disappointed. At the same time, the mood is quite calm. People have definitely stepped up vigilance. We're seeing that chlorine buckets have returned to the outsides of most shops, buildings and businesses here. Some of them had been taken down in the last few weeks as people adjusted to normal life after the previous cluster of cases, which killed, as you say, 4,800 people here. So people are wary of this new cluster. At the same time, they're calm. The government has voiced its disappointment, but at the same time, it said it's not particularly surprised that actually there would be a resurgence, at some point. Although, this is a very small scale one at this point.
Small scale one at this point. Ibrahima, you are in Ghana. The apprehensions in Ghana are not as severe as those in Liberia, but you're also very knowledgeable as what's happening in Sierra Leone. What are the efforts in Sierra Leone right now?
Well, in neighboring Sierra Leone, actually, as a first reaction, the government of that neighboring country to Liberia has strengthened and beefed up surveillance at the entry point, especially the borders with Liberia. Also, specialized equipment that were donated to the country during the height of Ebola outbreak have also been deployed, and healthcare personnel currently put on alert. This is unsurprisingly understandable because there is so much interactivity between the local populations of both Sierra Leone and Liberia.
Kate, you are on the ground in Liberia and you have a sense. Could you sort of share with us, do you believe that Ebola can be eradicated, or are people in Liberia feeling that this is a disease that they will have to live with for a very, very long time to come?
That seems to be the mood, and certainly there's a lot of speculation that this may be something that becomes quietly endemic, that pockets will just sort of start to pop up, as we've seen in Central Africa in the past, and that it's something that people will perhaps have to learn to live with. However, this new cluster of cases has tested the response of both the Ministry of Health and other institutions in the country. During the previous outbreak, we saw response times of about 1 week to 2 weeks, even longer, to respond to cases. This time, within 24 hours, the Ministry of Health had responded, had tested additional cases. So we have seen, definite improvements in the way that the management of Ebola has been handled, and perhaps that's something that will continue to be tested over time.
Well, the management of that is being put into question. Surely, would Liberian authorities have the capacity to start helping neighboring Guinea and Sierra Leone eradicate the virus itself, or would they be compounded by efforts in their own country, Liberia?
That's certainly the question, yeah. If resources, continue to need to be used here on the ground, then of course that questions how much can be done elsewhere. I was speaking with reporters in Sierra Leone this morning who have also voiced, extreme worry about the cases here in Liberia. We still don't know the source of this new outbreak, which is the most serious and certainly worrying part. Some Sierra Leoneans are concerned that the case could be something to do with the ongoing outbreak in Sierra Leone. So reputations are at stake as well. So we'll certainly have to see how this plays out in the coming days.
Ibrahima, contact tracing has always been a problem with Ebola, both in Sierra Leone, Liberia, or Guinea. Can you give us a little sense in Ghana, where you are Ghanaians concerned for what's happening not too very far from them? And if at all, are they making any efforts on the ground there?
Well, I think within the broader context of the Ebola treatment and also efforts that are being directed or deployed to tackle this menace, I think West African governments in general and Ghana in particular have their own local measures that they've put in place. If you go to, for example, any border crossing points of Ghana, you will see that they have equipment, specialized equipment put in place there where people's temperatures are measured, and also they have also got, I think, a treatment facility just in case of any potential outbreak. So, I mean, and also looking at the way people move within the sub-region, because the West African community of the economic community of West African states, ECOWAS, which are all the countries in West Africa actually belong to, have no visa, in place, which means that citizens can move from one country to the other unrestricted. And this is actually a big problem in terms of containing a communicable disease like Ebola. So as a result, I think governments around the region have their own, internal strategic measures that they put in place to ensure that at least not necessarily to control the movement of people, but to ensure that the disease is contained within a specific area to avoid it spreading to other countries that are not actually part of it now.
Kate, the picture from the rest of the West African countries is quite optimistic, but could you sort of share a sense as to how does the United States, which has been a superpower on the world stage, how have they helped these countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone and Guinea, and what efforts are they prepared to do right now, especially when they have wound down all their efforts over the last couple of months?
Yes. So the US particularly helped Liberia in the current Ebola outbreak. And did a lot in terms of building Ebola treatment units, deploying military troops to the ground, and also psychological help. I think people here felt greatly cheered that the US was here, that there was a strong presence here. And that suggested to them that things were under control, that there was international cohesion, if you like, in terms of tackling this. So I think, on that level of sort of lending support and boosting morale, they've done quite a lot. In terms of the new cluster of cases, I'm not aware of any US response from the military side of things. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is on the ground here, still has a significant team here, and has said that it's aiding the government authorities with the response.
And on that response, do you think that Liberia, that had been taken off the list of those countries that were affected, do you think that they'll be put back on the watch list for those who are traveling from that part of the region, including that from Liberia?
Well, that's the other concern as well. Lots of people here were glad that they were no longer subject to restrictions to travel to some parts of the world. And of course, those are likely to be lifted in the coming days. Liberia no longer has its Ebola-free status, which is something that has disappointed lots of people. So yes, that's certainly a concern here.
Ibrahima, in Ghana, is the consensus that the disease would be not be coming their own way soon? Is that the sense you have on the ground, that people are optimistic rather than pessimistic?
Well, I mean, the people are optimistic, but at the same time, cautiously optimistic, because the truth of the matter is that in much of West Africa, really, the health system is woefully unprepared for this kind of epidemic. And until recently, I mean, when we have what we call return migration back to Ghana, many of the experienced nurses and healthcare providers and doctors have been actually, going out of the countries in West Africa, and Ghana included. So the truth of the matter is that notwithstanding the preparatory mechanisms that have been put in place and the conscious and the continuous advocacy that is going on around this disease for people to be continually vigilant, there is also concern that healthcare facilities, actually, the core healthcare facilities, are not well prepared enough to handle an outbreak like this. And I think this is a major concern, not only among the citizenry, but also among policymakers, that appropriate steps need to be taken. West Africa has to get it right to ensure that the health care infrastructure is improved on, but also more motivation is given to healthcare providers to ensure that they are well-trained, information sharing at the level of states is improved, so that any outbreak like this could be quickly tackled and mechanisms found to contain it, not to spread around.
Well, clearly, the Ebola saga is going to carry on. I'm sure we'll be returning back to this Ebola crisis in West Africa soon. We'll be going for a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be having a review on the news. See you shortly after this.